Okay, well, great. Well, so what if we get moisture in our home? What harm can that be?
It can result in various ways. I think some of the first signs that we see in tiny houses are mildew popping up, just because we have a lot of built-ins, and so those areas that don't get a lot of airflow and a lot of ventilation can tend to have mildew growing. It could be, under a couch where there's a lot of things that you have stored under there, or in the cabinets. And unfortunately, tiny houses, have reported mold and mildew in cabinets and under the kitchen area. And it's just because the humidity content inside the space is so high. And there aren't things in place to mitigate those issues. But there's definitely a lot that you can do. And then after you kind of see a little bit of mildew or mold, it's typical for you to notice um, floorboard swelling or cabinet doors swelling. And like I said, with the trailer, with the thermal bridging, with that temperature coming through, that's often where you'll have that condensation. So it's like taking a cold beer out of the fridge on a hot day. On the inside of the house, you're going to have a little bit of condensation. And you can also see that on the interior of the windows. Um, and then, depending on what type of framing you have, or woodwork inside the house, that moisture is going to settle in that woodwork, in the trim or in the floorboards, or even in the studs in the wall, which you can't see, and that can attract termites and bugs. And then also it will affect the indoor air quality. So a lot of people live in humid climates where there are issues with mold, and then they begin to realize that they're getting headaches, or they're having mold toxicity symptoms, without really even realizing that they're dealing with it until it can be too late. Another thing that I talk to my clients about with consulting is build a bed frame that has proper ventilation underneath. A lot of people will just put a mattress in a loft. And oftentimes the lofted bedrooms are above the kitchen and the bathroom, so there's a lot of moisture going up there. And people will pull their mattress 6 months or a year later up and see that it has mildew and mold underneath.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, and I've seen places where your toilet tank, if you have a regular toilet, not a composting toilet, where the toilet tank is bringing in water from a well somewhere that's 50 degrees or so, and
Mhm.
that tank itself, if it's humid inside the home, will create some kind of condensation, and in the back where you don't really see it behind the toilet, you'll see possibly sometimes some mold forming over there. So it's a good place to take a look at it.
Yeah, and that's a really good point too, because that actually happens with our water lines inside our walls. We just don't see it. And so being conscious of what type of insulation you have, and just trying to be aware of that. I sell an interior vapor barrier that stops excess moisture from getting in there. So hopefully you don't have that condensation effect.
Wow. Yeah. No. Would never have thought of that. Water lines on the inside, kind of,
Yeah, yeah.
and getting moisture in there. So how can we avoid or solve the moisture issues, Isabel?
Well, houses were built really differently, 150, 200 years ago and beyond. They were built without all of these vapor barriers. Spray foam definitely wasn't a thing. And creating a really sealed house can create these issues. So basically, having a leaky house and a house that breathes can mitigate some of the issues, but it depends on the climate that you're in. If you're in a dry climate, then that can definitely help. But if you're in a humid climate, then it can't really help very much, because your interior climate is quite humid. So the first thing that's really important is having an air exchange unit, a heat recovery ventilation unit, or an energy recovery ventilation unit. Basically, what that does is they're really efficient, and they're able to recover the exiting temperature that's leaving the house and put that energy, that heat, or that cold temperature into the air that's coming in. So your heating unit or your AC unit isn't having to work much harder, but you're constantly getting fresh air into the space. So similar to oxygen bubbles in a fish tank, just constantly the air and the inhabitants. And this is, really in the winter time when you want to have all of your windows closed. But having an exhaust fan in the bathroom is key. Also, a hood vent over the stove, or if you use some type of exhaust fan that can do both. So my stove is 2 feet from my bathroom. So when I'm cooking, I just turn on my heat recovery ventilation system that has an exhaust mode only. And in that time, you also want to crack a window, or you want to have some fresh air intake so you're not depressurizing the space. But definitely air quality is something to be aware of. Also, adding a dehumidifier in the winter, I think, is a really good idea, and just knowing that it's going to be kind of part of your winter routine and starting that right from the beginning. You'll be surprised at how much water it will be pulling just from that small space. And then, like I mentioned before, creating a wall system that breathes and putting an interior vapor barrier that stops that excess moisture from getting into the wall system. I sell these vapor barriers from Germany that have a similar technology to Gore-Tex, like rain jacket material. So if there is moisture due to thermal bridging or condensation or those cold water lines in the wall system, it will allow that moisture to escape into your space and you can dry it out. But it won't let that excess moisture from showering and cooking and breathing get in there. And so along with a dehumidifier, I'm actually a huge supporter of wood stoves. I think that, it adds a complete different element to living in a tiny house. It's more work, than a mini split or an electric heater, but it's a really great source of dry heat. And I actually installed one in my house just in the early spring. And I'm really excited for next winter because I know that it's going to keep everything really dry. And you notice when you bring in wet clothes from outside, that's another thing that can really add to the humidity inside the house, or, towels from the shower drying. And when you have a wood stove, they dry really quick. And then another point that can affect the thermal bridging and the condensation inside the house is actually skirting the tiny house really well and high enough so that it covers the flange of the trailer and maybe up a few inches, 4 to 6 inches as well, where the walls meet the trailer and could possibly have that temperature transfer. So skirting is really important because it also stops wind and that cold air from getting underneath, but can just break that temperature up a little bit. And it protects your gray water lines and anything that you have under the house.
Great. Yeah. And getting back to the kitchen exhaust fan, I know
Mhm.
there are two types of kitchen exhaust fans. One of them actually doesn't vent to the outside. It just has a little filter in it. So if you're going to
Correct.
use a kitchen exhaust fan to eliminate moisture, then you would have to have one that would vent to the outside.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the ones that don't vent are mostly for air quality, and they have filters in them that just, filter out the carcinogens and the smoke that you get from cooking.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's great. So here's to kind of wrap this up, we want to say thank you so much for sharing your insights and knowledge with us today, Isabel.
Thanks for
And
having me.
again, once again, if you want to find out more about A Tiny Good Thing, just go to the bottom and click onto the link. If you want to know where we'll be or where I'll be with one of the events, go to noahcertified.org and click on the events tab and you'll see where we are. If you like what you hear on these videos, again, please tell your friends, like us on social media, share on your social media so that more people can take advantage of these videos. And if you want a copy of today's notes, we're going to also make them available to you. So you can either click on the bottom of this page or we'll make some other avenues for you to get a copy of these notes. So this is Robin Butler of NOAA, and we're promoting freedom to live where you want to, how you want to, in a safe and secure home. Thank you.